In 1977, in the afternoon, when I was 11 years old, me and a couple friends were crayfishing at Happy Hollow Park in San Jose, California. We were fishing on the other side of the creek, away from the park. As we were walking through the heavy bush, we seen a lady with long black hair and wearing a red short dress and blouse, with a thick black belt, standing behind some bushes. She kind of looked like she was from the 60s. She was just standing there and staring at us. We were going to ask her about how she got across the creek, because she was dressed nicely, and the crossing was about 10 to 20 feet, and there was no log or shallow part of the creek, and as we got closer, she just faded away. Then we just ran across the creek to the park. Me and my friends still remember this encounter. After this incident, I was interested in the paranormal and collected stories from my friends and family. I know this is kind of a short story, but I thought it was worth sharing. Thank you. I will try to make a short story, but wanted to share my story with your group. We purchased a home about 4.5 years ago. I met the lady and saw the husband only a short time when we had the inspection of the home. We were delayed on the closing because her husband passed away. Approximately 3 or 4 months after moving in, I kept seeing a man by our pool. Thinking it was the neighbor who lived behind us, I forgot about it. Our home sits on a couple of acres of land, and eventually, I started seeing this man near the woods and where they had a garden plot before. It appeared as though this man was hiding and smoking cigarettes of all things. I met and talked to one of the neighbors and told her of the strange behavior of the neighbor and asked if he ever did that on our property. I described the man to her and what he was doing, and her face went white. She told me I was describing the old owner of the house and that he died of lung cancer, but refused to stop smoking and did those things while living there so as his family wouldn't catch him. Eventually, he started appearing to me in the house, especially in the evening hours, sometimes slamming doors to unoccupied rooms or making hammering noises in the garage, which is under our house. It is just my husband and I who live in the house, and for almost 1.5 years, I was the only one to see him, but other people could hear the noises. Finally, my husband did see him, or what he thought to be the shadow of a man behind him, one day in our bedroom. As time went on, he became more and more active until I started to be afraid to be in the house by myself. He was beginning to be active, even during the daytime. I don't know if active is the right words to describe this, so I apologize if I am wrong. I finally was able to track down the previous owners and tell them what was going on. These people were wonderful and believed everything I was trying to tell them because of the things I was able to tell them about Dave that I couldn't have possibly known. They contacted us and agreed to come over to our house. They went through the whole house and talked to Dave as if he was there and telling him he had died. They told him we were the owners of the house now, and he no longer lived there, and he had to leave. Now, I'm surely not a ghost expert, but I do know that after that night, I've never seen or heard from him again. Did this man cross over as I heard shows talk about? Luckily, I have wonderful friends, and they believe me, even though if I hadn't been there, I might have not. Thank you for listening to my story, even though you've probably heard stories like this quite often. Your website is great. I enjoyed visiting. When I was younger, I often despised sleeping in our basement, especially alone, so oftentimes, I would stay in my sister's room whenever my brother, who I shared a room with, was on a scouting adventure or something of that nature. But one night, I was out of luck when it came to the blessing of having someone to sleep with, when they were all either gone at a friend's house or attending girls' camp or a fishing trip. And of course, being 10 years of age, my mother, although loving and magnificent, believed I was a little too old to sleep with her. So I came up with a plan. I would invite my best friend over. Ever since Kristen and I were 4 years old, she has always hated that there were bars over our basement windows. Well, finally, it was off to bed. We scurried about brushing our teeth and giggling before Mom came to tuck us in. My brother and I shared a bunk bed, and I always liked to sleep up top. I felt safer with the concoct idea that any monsters would have to eat whoever's on the bottom bunk before they could get to me. Therefore, I could easily get away. Hope you followed it. Anyways, back to the story. So we were laying there and talking, and slowly drifted off to sleep, when I was suddenly awakened by a strange noise outside of the barred window. I glanced over to see what appeared to be a woman in white, staring with no expression at all at Kristen and I from outside the window. My heart began to race. I'd never seen her before. She has dark brown hair that seemed to be ratted, and a long-stained, torn and tattered dress. She looked so pale, and like I said, she was merely staring with no expression. I was officially freaked out. I thought I should calm down. It's my imagination running wildly, because I'm not with anybody or anyone. So I closed my eyes, praying that when I opened them again, she would be gone. So then I opened them, and she was still there. This time, she reached out her hands to me as though she wanted to hold me. I screamed, and then noticed she wasn't looking at me anymore, merely placing her focus on Kristen. Then I saw Kristen get up. She started walking towards the window. I called her name and said, "What are you thinking?" Kristen ignored me and continued walking. She crawled up on top of her toy box and began to unlatch the window. I screamed for her to stop. She seemed as though she was in a trance or daze and couldn't even hear me. I struggled between staying in bed and not moving, or getting up and latching the window and saving Kristen. My heart was racing. I felt nauseated. Then, all of a sudden, everything returned to normal. Then, all of a sudden, she woke up. She was awake from her trance. It turns out that she was sleepwalking. Curiously enough, I looked outside the window again, and the woman that I once saw had completely vanished. I was completely confused and dumbfounded. So I went over to Kristen to see if she was alright. At this point, Kristen was in my arms. She was shaking uncontrollably, and she regained consciousness. I asked her what she was thinking, why she ignored me, and she said all she could recall was an angelic voice singing to her, begging her to come with her. I said, "What?" She said she had some sort of dream or vision, and this is what happened. At that point, that's when I told Kristen that she got up and walked towards the window. I also let her know that there was a woman right outside the barred window, and she couldn't even believe it. Maybe this was the angelic person that she was talking about, the woman. Maybe she telepathically communicated, and as a result, ended up infiltrating her dreams, and then Kristen started sleepwalking. I know you might think I'm crazy, but this story did actually happen. I can vouch for two people being there, me, and of course her side of the story. Immediately when it happened, we were both so frozen that we didn't know what to do after that. I looked at Christy, and she was so delirious, but also very shocked at everything that happened. I asked her if she wanted to go to sleep again, and she replied, "But I can barely even move." So I said, "We can sleep here right on the floor." The next day, when we were at breakfast, we both just knew that this isn't a story many would believe, so we mostly just kept to ourselves. Until, of course, I actually wrote this story here today. Thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate you letting me tell this tale. And believe me, this is not something anyone would want to experience, but I guess we have a good story now. So impressed and comforted by your sight, I had an experience at the Sourdough Inn in Seward, Alaska 2 years ago that I've never shared with people anymore because they don't believe me, and felt inspired to write after reading on your site. The hotel was a brothel at the turn of the century, and the innkeeper will happily tell you that the upper rooms are haunted by the spirits of the girls who lived there. The most prevalent is the lady in white, who was the madam. I may be remembering the name wrong, but there are a few rooms downstairs in the basement as well, and that is where I had my encounter. My friend, Ollie, and I decided to stay there because of the legends, and had spent 2 nights upstairs without a peep. Our last night was in the basement. I had a little head cold and sniffles, and the innkeeper advised us to keep the windows closed due to a nasty draft. After securing the windows shut, we went to bed. About 2 hours into a fitful sleep, I was awakened by the window creaking open. I thought it was odd, since we had latched it. The window being to my left, I was staring at it when I realized there was a woman in white standing next to my bed. This is typically where people stop believing me. She noticed me notice her and reached out to feel my forehead. She was also holding what looked like a towel in her right hand and was smiling in the most comforting way. I couldn't help it though. I reached out and shook Ollie awake, looked back, and she was still there. Ollie fumbled to focus, and then I screamed like I've never screamed before in my life. I think she was just checking and making sure I was okay. And here's the interesting thing too. When we finally woke up and got our bearings, we realized the room was way too hot and even smelled a little funny. We had left our propane lantern on. I think that's why she opened the window. I feel better. It is a beautiful, magical place to stay. If I ever return, I've every intention. There was no malice in her visit. I only hope I cannot scream at her if I ever see her again. I just wanted to write and say that I had a scary experience at Banks, Ohio, House of Nightmares haunted house. Well, I was on the volunteer fire department for Centerburg, and we went there to work and to inspect the house. Well, one night, they had me working the spider, which I had to go up on the staircase by myself. The house once was an orphanage, mental hospital, and a Bible college. While I was working the spider, I had to look down to watch when the people were coming. Well, once, I just felt like someone was watching me, so I looked up and saw this little girl. She was see-through and was wearing a white tattered nightgown, had blonde hair, and was dragging a brown teddy bear. She was looking towards the ground, so I just started to freak out. So I shut my eyes and opened them again, and she was gone. Another experience I had at this house of nightmares. I was working the spider, and up on the staircase there was no door or anything, and I heard this man's voice ask if I was okay. Yes, up on the staircase, at the top, where there is no door, just completely alone and isolated from the rest of the people. And since there is no door, there is no way anyone could have gotten up there. Another time, when I was working on the spider, again, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. It almost looked like a floating head coming straight towards me. Because I was looking at it in the corner of my eye, I couldn't get a clear look of what it looked like. But it could have been an orb as well. I'm not sure though, but I had a feeling that it was a head. Anyway, thanks for allowing me to share my story. I know it sounds kinda weird, but all of these events are true. I have felt, until rather recently, an unsettling presence in my apartment since my ex-husband moved out last November. It was almost as if the dwelling itself warned me away from crossing into particular rooms or areas of the apartment. There had been times when I could not sleep in my own bedroom because it was located near the rear of the apartment. I was afraid to go past the middle hallway. One night, I came up to get a jacket while my boyfriend was waiting outside for me, in the car. I got as far as 1 foot in the doorway and felt the overwhelming presence, in some sense telling me to turn around and get out now. I forgot about the jacket and ran back downstairs and outside. I hadn't had one of those experiences in some time until my best friend came over to do an in-depth tarot card reading. She relies upon the power of her spirits and her Lord Phoenix. She's a Phoenix witch, which she explains to me as someone who has crossed over, was offered a second chance at life, or with the cost of helping less fortunate souls find their way back to heaven. My boyfriend was there at the time as well. When she was about finished with her reading, I happened to glance over by my computer in the dining room and saw a small, round, blurry ball floating past the computer and disappearing before it reached my living room where we were doing the reading. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I had to use the bathroom, which was located near the bedroom. As I went to get up and glance in that direction of the apartment, I had the overwhelming feeling to stay back away from there again. I asked her what was over there, and she went into the middle hallway with the candle. She came back with an angry expression, saying that the thing called her an abomination. She felt it referred to her being brought back and given a second chance at life. She felt the presence was jealous and hurt. She called me over to join her in the exorcism of the spirit. When she asked it repeatedly to leave, we both heard it in a strong, emphatic male voice say, "No." I was so scared. What scared me even more was that my boyfriend declared out of the blue, "Someone died in your bathroom." What? Yes, someone died in your shower. I knew about it since the first time I showered here. I decided it was not wise to sleep alone in my place that night, so as I went into my bedroom with both friends to pack, we noticed that things in my room had been disturbed and moved around. When we moved into my bathroom to get my toiletries, my boyfriend proceeded to tell me how the person died, slipped and fell in the shower, broken neck. I couldn't take it anymore and left that night. That was the last time I had my best friend to do any readings here without her spirit protection. This event is true and happened when I was 9 years old. It was the night of November 12th, my birthday. Me and my friends were walking back from the bowling alley to my house for a sleepover. The bowling alley was only 10 minutes away. Anyway, on the way back, my friend Matt dared me to go to the middle of the woods without my flashlight. I went in and came out 10 minutes later. All my friends had terrified looks on their faces. "What?" I asked. Matt pointed behind me. When I turned around, a 5-foot-tall woman in a white dress with black hair was standing there. She looked really mad. We ran as fast as we could. We finally got to the house and jumped in our sleeping bags. No one moved, and we eventually all fell asleep. I awoke at 3 a.m. in the morning to go get a glass of water. I had totally forgot about the incident until I stopped and heard very, very heavy breathing behind me. I thought it was my dog, but when I turned around, it was her. She had the same look on her face. I screamed as loud as I could, and my friends came running down the hall, asking me what happened. I told them, and we all went back in the room and stayed up until the next day. I told my mom what happened, but she didn't believe me. That is, until she found my pet snake dead, and she started seeing the strands of long black hair all over the house. We moved out shortly after that, and I will never go back to that house again, let alone look at it. I still find black hair in my bed sometimes, even though we're at our new house, and there's no one in my family with black hair. I think she is following me, maybe trying to tell me something. On rare occasions I'll be playing my drum set, when all of a sudden I stop and hear mumbling and groaning. If I ever have an encounter with this ghost again, I'll send it ASAP. Thank you. My name is Tariq, and this is my supernatural experience. It happened to me when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I seem to remember it was quite a sunny afternoon. Nothing particularly unusual about that day. My mother asked me to go upstairs and wake my father, who often took afternoon naps. I remember feeling quite lazy, and I could not really be bothered going all the way upstairs to attempt to wake my dad sleeping. However, my mom insisted, so I did. I was about to walk up the stairs when I suddenly was overcome with fear, as what I had saw made no sense to me. There, at the top of the stairs, was the biggest dog I'd ever seen in my life. It appeared to fill the whole space of the landing and was near the height of the ceiling. The dog appeared to be aggressive and was barking and growling so loud that it could have woken the dead. I was so shaken and scared that I just froze in the spot. I shouted for my mom. I said, "Mom, I can't go upstairs," and she told me not to be lazy. I told her no, there was this big dog at the top of the stairs, and it would not let me pass. My mom came out to me, and she said, "Tariq, we do not even have a dog." Of course, this is what I already knew. I quickly told my mom to get over here and see what I was seeing, but by the time she arrived and looked up the stairs, it was gone. This perplexed me even more, and being the age I was, I couldn't even understand it. I started to doubt myself, wondering if I ever even saw it at all, and I trusted and believed in my mother. So if she didn't really see it, maybe I was just hallucinating, and it really wasn't there. Obviously, the dog disappeared, and after a while, I forgot about it, and never resurfaced again. However, these memories came back when I was about 12 years old, and I spoke to my mom about it. Looking back on it, I do believe I saw something paranormal, but any ideas on why my mom or dad could not see it or hear it, and why was the dog being so protective, beats me. I don't know, but it was sure a scary sight. It just sucks that I feel like I was the only one who had saw it, and it makes me crazy. But what can you do? I don't know. I recently had an experience that I can't explain, and decided to tell my story here. In June, my boyfriend Ian, our then 15-month-old twins, of course me as well, we all went to his family reunion. While we were there, we had a wonderful time meeting his family and getting to know everyone really well. We stayed at his father and stepmother's home with the immediate family. One night, while everyone was asleep, one of the girls started crying, most likely from being in a new place or losing her pacifier. I woke up, and still groggy, I sat up in the bed. I looked over to the crib. Next to the crib, there was a little old woman standing there looking into the crib. When I saw her, she didn't scare me, and I thought nothing of it. She looked at me, put her finger up to her mouth, kind of bent down, and whispered, "Shh." So I laid back down and fell back to sleep. Brianna slept through the rest of the night. The next morning, I got up and remembered what I saw. Not sure if I dreamt it or not. I pulled Ian away from the family and asked him if he had a picture of his grandmother. The family had spoken a lot of her the previous day at the reunion, but I had never met her. Ian was very close to her, and was very upset at the time of her death. It would have been almost 9 years ago. They found one, and after I saw the picture, I felt this warmth, the only way I can describe it, and it filled my body. It was the lady I saw the night before. I wasn't sure if I should tell anyone, for fear of them thinking I was insane, but I decided to tell Ian. When I told him, he kinda gasped. Like I said, he was very close to his grandmother. I'm glad I told him. Later, as we were talking to the family, someone said, "Oh, it would have been so wonderful for her to be here and see all the family together." Speaking of the grandmother, Ian looked at me and asked me to tell everyone what I saw. I'm still new to this family and wouldn't want to be dubbed as the crazy one just yet, so I kept it to myself. Thanks for giving me a place to share this. In 1983, we moved into a home that had suddenly been vacated by the owners. The man had suffered a heart attack at the front door and died. His wife went into serious shock and suffered some emotional distress. After the funeral, her children decided to take her back to Missouri. I'd personally known the couple in 1971, as I had lived in a house on the connecting street. Our backyards were contiguous. Mr. Williams had been the water superintendent for the city for many years. He was an upstanding citizen, a loving family man, and a friend to many people. Shortly after moving in, he got the feeling that Mr. Williams had never really left his home. At night, after everyone had turned in, footsteps could be heard throughout the home. It sounded like heavy footsteps stomping up and down the hall, outside the bedrooms. I would get up and check to see if the children were awake, and would find them sleeping soundly in their beds. Once in a while, doors would open up wide, as if someone was entering a room, and then the door would slam shut. One night, my wife at the time awoke to see the form of a man standing at the end of our bed. He woke up on her side and leaned over a little. She laid there terrifying, knowing that I was very hard to wake up, and that if this were a burglar, I would not suddenly spring into action against the intruder. She maintained her position and just peered through her eyelids. Suddenly, the figure just faded away. These occurrences persisted for about a month. One morning, at around 2:30 a.m., we were suddenly awakened by the bedroom door slamming open with a violent force. We were very tired of Mr. Williams' nightly tirades, and I was running on my last nerve. I got up and decided to try to talk with this confused soul. I addressed him as Mr. Williams and told him that he had suffered a heart attack and had died. I told him that his wife had gone to Missouri to live with his children. I told him that we were paying rent to his children to live in this house, and we worked hard for our money. I started to get angry with him, and told him that if he wanted to rant and rave and stomp about the house, he needed to do it when we weren't there, as he was disturbing our sleep. If he continued, we would be forced to move, and his children would have to find other renters. I suggested he go to Missouri, because that is where he would find his wife. After that, we never heard from Mr. Williams again. In August of 1997, I was helping a friend deliver some things for a post-funeral reception that was to be held in the officers' quarters number 1 at Fort Concho in San Angelo, Texas. Fort Concho is the best preserved and reconstructed cavalry fort in America. This is where the Buffalo Soldiers were stationed. It was very early in the morning, and we had to get the key to the building from the curator. We drove to the other side of the parade ground and parked the van. We went inside, and I took some things up to the staircase to the second floor, while my buddy worked on the first floor. I walked into the west bedroom upstairs, and immediately felt like I had just walked between two people that were standing shoulder to shoulder. I was walking into a tremendous field of static electricity. I had a cold sensation, and the hairs on my neck and arms stood straight out. I put the vase down that I was carrying, and found myself compelled to say, "Excuse me." Then I proceeded to the east bedroom. When I entered the room, I saw a little girl out of the corner of my eye, playing on the floor to my left. I placed the vase, and when I turned around, she faded away. A couple of days later, I was again with my friend. We stopped by the house of the lady who was responsible for financing the restoration of Officers' Quarter Number 1. My friend mentioned that I had felt a presence and saw a little girl. I told her that I had seen her in the east bedroom, and she told me that a little girl had died in that very room. Maybe it was her parents that I felt in the west bedroom, or just someone else watching over her. A few months later, I had the opportunity to stop by the Officers' Quarters Number 1 when it was open to the public. I was walking around, and a staff member volunteer came up and asked me what I thought of the building. I told her I thought it was haunted, and repeated the story of the little girl. The lady took me into the dining room and pointed to a portrait on the wall. It was the same little girl I had seen upstairs. I would first like to say, I was not a believer in ghosts or spirits. I was in the Navy at the time, and had been just transferred to Japan. My family and I arrived there in August of '91. I felt very lucky because the Navy had just opened Harrio, a new housing complex about 9 miles from the naval base. This meant that my family and I would not have to live off base. My wife and I were taken out to the Harrio to pick out a house. Being newly opened, we basically had the pick of the litter. My wife and I chose a nice 3-bedroom room townhouse in the center of the housing complex. We moved in within 3 days and began to settle down. Nothing much happened for the first month or two. Then one night, my daughter, who was 3 at the time, started waking up at night crying. She would point at the wall and tell me to make the snake lady go away. This happened about once a week. Of course, I thought she was just having bad dreams. We let her sleep in her bed when this happened. My wife became pregnant at the time, and we were allowed to move into a 4-bedroom house. I was hoping this move would solve the snake lady problem. As we moved into the new house, I assured her the snake lady was gone forever. Boy, was I wrong. It was about 2 weeks before our encounters with the snake lady started again. This time my wife and I could actually feel some sort of electrical charge throughout the house. These encounters intensified, and my daughter started to see more and more apparitions. She would tell me that the snake lady wanted to take her away. I, being a skeptic, thought the electrical charge was sort of funny, but never gave much thought about my daughter's nightmare being real. Then one night, my wife and I were awakened by my daughter screaming at the top of her lungs. We rushed into her room to find her pressed against the far wall, her feet approximately 1 foot off the ground. My wife and I both grabbed her arms, and with one of my feet pressed against the wall, I pulled with all my might. She wouldn't budge. I'm not a small man, 5'10", 191 pounds, and I worked out all the time. I could not get her off the wall. All the while she was screaming that the snake lady wanted to take her away. Scared to death, I started praying in my head. My daughter started to slide down the wall, and she fell into our arms. I don't know what it was, but I believe there is something out there that we don't know about.
The next day I blessed every room in the house with olive oil. This seemed to do the trick, because my daughter never had another experience. My wife is Japanese, and she did some investigating of the area's history. Harrio was once an internment camp for the sick and dying Japanese soldiers of World War II. There is a shrine just outside the back gate for the soldiers that died there. And that's what we found out. Thanks for reading. It's funny, really, because I've been reading your site for quite some time and have marveled over the experiences people have had, but never, ever thought I would be emailing you my story. This experience is mainly my two friends, but I experienced it firsthand last night. They live in RAF, Royal Air Force Quarters, in Middlesex in England, and have never really mentioned anything before. A couple of weeks ago, Susie and I were chatting about various things when the subjects of ghosts came up. Funny enough, the handprints have come back since Elena was born, said Susie. Handprints? What handprints? I replied. It seems that since they moved in over 3 years ago, they've had various things happen. So she took me upstairs, and there, clear as day, was a set of huge handprints on the wall, just above their bed. Apparently, she has tried everything to get rid of them, and they disappeared when she was pregnant. As soon as the baby was born, they came back, and when I saw Susie and Jay last night, they casually informed me that the handprints had moved. By now, I was getting quite spooked out. We went outside for a cigarette, with one of the music channels on the TV playing. When we came back in, the channel had changed to some gruesome true murder documentary. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing on edge at this stage, and it took Susie a good 5 minutes to change the channel back. Also, they've both watched a candle that stood on top of the telly very casually move from the middle and drop off at the end. Things have been moved around, never hidden, and the TV also turns on and off. Susie and Jay were very relaxed about this, and the ghost obviously means them no harm. Last night, it was Susie, Jay, and me, and they told me what happened last Sunday. Apparently, Susie had gone up to change Elena, and had set out her pajamas and nappy out in the changing mat in the bedroom. She was bathing Elena, and thought that perhaps she could use one of the smaller nappies instead of the big one that she had pulled out. When she went back into the bedroom, the pajamas and the big nappy had been thrown onto the chair, and in a perfect arc were 3 of the smaller nappies on the changing mat. Poor Jay got it right in the neck for that, until he explained that he hadn't been upstairs at all. Again, the hairs on my neck were standing on end, and when I had to go upstairs to use their toilet, Susie had to come with me. We then went out for a cigarette, and as we were sitting there, I saw the shadow of someone walking to the kitchen. Didn't think anything of it, until I realized that we were all sitting outside. I told them, and Susie said that she sees shadows out of the corner of her eye all the time. We then went back in, and I was sitting on the sofa next to Susie, talking to Jay, when I noticed that she was staring at something right behind her. I asked what she was looking at, but she said nothing at first, knowing how freaked out I was getting. She then began to tell me that she noticed a transparent man with an axe lodged into his forehead casually move from the room we were in and into the kitchen, then disappear. She had told me that when she was alone in the living room, another time, that she also saw a man sitting down at the kitchen table, as if he was writing on a piece of paper, then disappear shortly after. Apparently, they are not the only ones to experience things. It seems that quite a few people in the row of houses had strange things happen, and the couple on end have seen a shadowy figure. She asked me to babysit Elena next week. Must admit, not too keen on having the extra company though. When I was about 10 years old, my family lived with my great-grandmother and me, and my brother had to sleep in the basement. Half was for storage, half was an extra room. So one night, at like 3, I had to walk to the top floor to take a pee. On my way down, I hear the voice of a little girl say goodbye. Then I noticed that same voice, and it said die. I immediately freaked out and ran back into my room, absolutely terrified. There was another incident with my brother. He was in the basement, and he heard the same voice coming up the stairs from it. It said die as well. And he turned back, looked down the stairs, and the apparition of a girl was standing right there, and then materialized and disappeared in an instant. When I was 15, we moved out to New Jersey. When I was 16, I heard horribly violent screaming. It sounded like a woman, and it sounded like it was coming from behind me. 3 days later, my brother, he was 19. He heard the same screaming coming from our bedroom closet. Nowadays, we don't hear any mysterious voices, but we both know they had to be ghosts. And not only that, they had to be evil. And I don't want to experience that ever again. I'm sure my brother doesn't want to either. Thanks for listening.
Why don't you gotta like the video? I mean, I don't know what that means, but please like the video, share, and subscribe. If you want new videos, I almost said moo, like a cow, 'cause I'm a cow man. Moo. Anyway, if you got to the end of the video, please say moo, because it makes me happy. And it helps algorithm and all that good stuff. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Please leave a like, share, because I'm a small YouTube channel. Love you, and see you in the next video.